I'm being serious.
Hey, what's up guys? Today this video is going to be the start of a new series on this channel, where I go over the basics of PvP in Dark Souls 3. So if you're just starting out, then this video should be perfect for you. But if you already have some experience in PvP, then I would still suggest you stick around for future videos in this series. As we progress, we're going to cover more and more advanced topics, and there's going to be videos covering more advanced tips and tricks as well. Even though this game has been out for a while, I know that there are still players that are just now starting PvP or have just picked up the game for the first time, and so I wanted to make the most up-to-date tutorial for getting started, and I'm hoping that this series will have all the information you need in order to become a knowledgeable and skilled PvP player. So without any further ado, let's get right into the video. Okay, so the first thing that I'd like to explain are what things will actually affect your PvP experience. So that being, what decisions that you make in game and things that you do will actually decide which players you're going to be able to play with. Now, there are two things in the game that decide which players you will have the opportunity to matchmake with. And those are, first, your soul level. So on this character, you can see that I'm soul level 61. And the second one being your weapon upgrade level. So what is your highest weapon upgrade? Now it doesn't matter if you have not all your weapons at the same upgrade level, it's just what is your highest weapon level upgrade. So now you can see on this account it is +6, I don't have any higher than that, and then for the other weapons +3. So some weapons obviously go to +10, and some weapons go to +5. And so I have the ones that go to +10 at +6, and the ones that only go to +5 at +3. So it is just your soul level and your weapon upgrade level that decide which players you have the opportunity to play against. It does not matter what level your Estus is upgraded to, whether that be +6 or +8 or +10, and it doesn't matter how many Estus you have. So you can have the maximum of 15 at whatever soul level you're at, and it will not affect who you are playing against. If one person had their Estus upgraded to +5, for example, and another person had their Estus upgraded to +10, as long as they were both the same soul level and had their weapons upgraded to the exact same level, they would be matchmaking with the exact same people, and it would not matter that one has +10 and the other one has +5. So it is for this reason that I would always recommend you try to have the maximum number of Estus, which is 15, and try to have it upgraded to the maximum level as well, which is +10, because once again, it does not affect who you will be playing with. Now that you know which things affect matchmaking, it's time to decide which soul level character you would like to use. When it comes to deciding your soul level, there are a few different options that I would recommend you choose from. The first one being soul level 61, as I mentioned this build is earlier, with weapons that are able to be upgraded to a maximum level of +10, being +6, and weapons that are upgraded to a maximum level of +5, being at +3. The next option would be soul level 89, with weapons upgraded to the maximum level, so +10 and +5. Then soul level 105, 120, 125, 133, and of course the max soul level bracket, so why not go to soul level 802. For new players, I would highly recommend you start out playing at soul level 61, and then as time goes on and you improve, you can test out some of those other soul levels that I mentioned. My reasoning behind this is because at soul level 61, there's a decent amount of different builds that you should be able to make, as well as a decent amount of weapons that you should be able to wield at this soul level. And trying out different weapons is a really important thing to do when you're starting out, and I'll touch on this a little bit later in the video as well. At soul level 61, there should also be a decent amount of players who are new to the game as well, and this way you should be able to play against players of a similar skill level. Now that you've decided your soul level, it's time to decide which type of build you would like to use. There are three main options for build types that I would suggest. The first one being a strength build, the second one being a dexterity build, and the third one being a quality build, which is a mix between a dexterity build and a strength build. Of these three options, I would suggest that you start out by using a strength build. My reasoning for this is because with strength builds, there's a lot of really cool weapons that you can use, especially if you like the big great hammers and great axes, as well as the fact that you'll generally have a lot of poise, which means you'll be able to trade with people, and usually win those trades. And so overall, strength builds are a little bit more forgiving. But don't worry about what poise is yet, I'll get into that in another future video. For now, you just need to know that there's a lot of cool weapons that you can use, but at the end of the day, like I said, you have those three options. Dexterity is another good option as well, and same with quality, but it's up to you. And if you're unsure about what you should be using for stats, here's an example of a soul level 133 strength build that I really like. You can see that I have quite a bit of vigor, and I've also invested a decent amount of stat points into endurance. And this is because when we're using these big weapons, they're going to use lots of stamina each time we swing them. Next, we have a pretty good amount of vitality as well, and this is so when we're using these big heavy weapons, we're not fat rolling. And I'm going to touch a little bit more on fat rolling versus medium rolling versus light rolling later on in this video. And lastly, we have our strength stat, which is at 60, which is the main stat investment of this build. So overall, we have our 4 main stats that we're investing into with a strength build, and that is vigor, endurance, vitality, and strength. When it comes to making a soul level 61 strength build, I'll put the stats up on screen for that, as well as a soul level 61 dexterity build that I really like. Now keep in mind that there are tons of different builds out there, so you can simply do a Google search or a YouTube search for whatever soul level you want, whether that be soul level 89 or soul level 125, and just simply search for it, soul level 89 strength build or soul level 89 dexterity build. And there's going to be tons of options out there of different builds that you can choose from and try to base yours around. Alright, now that you've chosen your soul level and you have your stats, it's time to decide which equipment you're going to use. To start with, for your equipment, I want to go over your weapon choice, and I want to explain how you can figure out which weapons should go on which build. On this strength build, you can see that I have 3 different claymores. One of them is just the standard claymore, then I have a heavy claymore, and lastly a refined claymore. When I bring up the stats initially, you can see that there's sections called attribute bonus and attribute requirement. To start with, I'm going to talk about attribute requirement. What these are basically just the stats required in order to wield the weapon. So you can see you need 16 strength and 13 dex in order to be able to use the weapon properly. If you don't have these stats for a weapon, if you don't have the attribute requirements, then that weapon is most likely not worth using because you're not going to do very much damage at all with it, and so generally you want to stay away from the weapons you don't meet the requirements for. Then we have attribute bonus, and this is what people refer to as weapon scaling. You can see that it has a C in the strength category, then a D in the dex category. Then it doesn't scale with any other stats besides those 2. In terms of weapon scaling, it generally goes from A to E, with A being the best and E being the worst. However, there's also a special scaling option, which is S, and that is even better than the A scaling. So on the claymore here, you can see that we have C and D. So it is primarily scaling with strength, and a little bit worse, but it's still scaling with dex as well. Now when we come over to our heavy claymore here, you can see that the scaling has changed. And so we now have A scaling in the strength category, and the dex category has disappeared. It is no longer scaling with dex. Then, when we come down to the refined claymore, you can see that once again the scaling has changed. We now have C for scaling in the strength category, and C for scaling in the dexterity category. So if we come back to the standard claymore here, you can see that when it starts out, it has a C scaling in the strength category and a D scaling in the dexterity category. What this means is that the claymore would probably do the best job on a strength build like this one, since it's scaling the highest in the strength category. But we can see that it would also do a pretty good job if we had a quality build as well, since it's scaling with both dex and strength. Lastly, a dexterity build would probably still be able to use this weapon fairly well, but quality and strength would definitely be best for this weapon. Now, the reason that we want to infuse our weapons like this and have a heavy claymore or a refined claymore is because you can see here when we make it a heavy one, we're making it scale primarily with strength, as we just saw, and this way we're able to do the most damage. When we come down to the refined claymore, as we just saw, it has C scaling in both categories. This makes refined the best option for a quality build, and heavy the best option for a strength build. So that is why on this strength build, we're going to be using the heavy claymore. And as you can see here with the physical attack power, when we switch from the refined claymore doing 248 plus 207, now we have our heavy claymore with 255 plus 253. So we can see that this is definitely the better option on this build. So from looking at the base weapon's initial scaling, we were able to determine whether or not the claymore might be a viable option for this build. Then, since we're on a strength build, we decided to infuse the claymore and make it heavy, as this is the way that we're able to make it scale the best with strength. However, if we were on a quality build, we would probably want to use a refined claymore. In general, you want to be using heavy infused weapons on strength builds, refined infused weapons on quality builds, and sharp weapons on dexterity builds. Those are generally the types of infusions that work best with those builds. As I mentioned earlier, when you're first starting out, I would recommend that you try as many different weapons as possible in order to learn their movesets and figure out what their strengths and weaknesses are. This will also allow you to figure out which weapons are your favorites and which ones suit your playstyle the best. So as long as you meet the attribute requirements for the weapon, and it scales decently well with strength, I would recommend putting it in your inventory to give it a try. Don't worry about inventory management for now, just slap everything in there and get to trying different things out. The next equipment items that we're going to be going over is our armor setup. So to start, I would recommend that you equip your heaviest weapon or heaviest setup that you're planning on using. For me, that's going to be Lido's Great Hammer, which is 28. And I'm not going to be planning on using anything in the offhand while I'm using this weapon, so I'll leave it like this. Then, when you come to your armor, you decide which armor you want to use based on your weight ratio. On a strength build, you generally want to use the armor that's going to give you the most absorption or the most poise. And in most cases, the heavier the armor, the more poise and the more absorption you're going to get. However, we want to make sure that our weight ratio does not go over 70%. This is what I was talking about earlier when I was referring to fat rolling versus medium rolling versus light rolling. As you can see, I'm currently at 69.7% weight ratio with this weapon and this armor setup. However, if I were to switch the helmet to something that's just a little bit heavier, once I go over that 70% threshold, now that I'm at 70.5%, I'm now going to start fat rolling, and that's what this looks like. And generally, this is bad. You don't want to be fat rolling, as this is going to affect your gameplay and make things a lot more difficult for you. So for now, just make sure you're under that 70% weight ratio with whatever setup you're using, and like I said, we'll explain more about the 3 different types of rolls in a future video. Another important thing to note is that rings will also affect your weight ratio, being that they have a weight, but some of them also will alter your stats. So for example here, you can see the Ring of Favor plus 3 increases my HP, my stamina, and my maximum equip load. Same with the Havel's Ring, it also increases my maximum load. And finally, I have the Prisoner's Chain on, which increases vigor, endurance, and vitality, but I end up taking more damage. When it comes to choosing the ring setup on your build, luckily there's a pretty standard layout that you'll see on almost every single build. And that is the Prisoner's Chain, along with the Ring of Favor plus 3, and the Hornet Ring. These are all really good rings, and the only one that you might see swapped out is Havel's Ring plus 3. Since we're on a strength build right now, and we want to use those really big weapons, this ring is helpful for us. However, if we were using a different build such as a quality build or a dexterity build, then this ring may not be necessary. Instead, we might opt to use something like the Life Ring, or maybe Lloyd's Sword Ring, or maybe his Shield Ring. Those are the general 4 options to choose from in this one kind of ring slot that you have to play around with, but other than that, it's pretty standard to use the Hornet Ring, Ring of Favor, and the Prisoner's Chain. So when it comes to choosing an armor setup for your build, you can always have a look through at each armor set and its unique stats, or you can also have a look at this website called Souls Planner. Now, what's great about Souls Planner and what I think makes it such a valuable resource is that it allows you to input your character's stats and exactly what weapon setup you want to use, along with your ring setup, and you can just come down here and hit optimal armor. And then what you can choose is up to 70% load, so that means we're going to be medium rolling. And then we can find the optimal armor for physical damage absorption, poise, or whatever else we would like, and this website is going to automatically pick the exact armor set that's going to be the best for whatever we're looking for. So here I'm going to choose, for example, let's say we want the best armor set for poise, up to 70% load, that's good, and then we're just going to hit find. And you can see right here, the best possible combination is Exile Mask, Gundir's Armor, Cathedral Knight Gauntlets, and Gundir's Leggings. Now we know with that armor setup, we're going to be under 70% load, so we're going to be normal rolling, and we're also going to have the best possible poise. Now if we jump back into game here, I've equipped that armor setup, and you can see that we're at 69.9% weight ratio, so the perfect amount while still being under 70%, so we're normal rolling, and this is effectively the best possible armor setup for this weapon setup and ring setup while staying under 70%, and we now have the most poise we could possibly get. So that's a really quick and easy way to optimize your armor, and I'll leave a link to Souls Planner in the description of this video. The last things that I'd like to talk about in terms of equipment are the items that you're storing in your inventory. It's a good idea to have all the different consumable items in your inventory, as each of them has a very specific use. But in this video, I'd like to touch on a few of the most important ones. The first important item is the Seek Brow, and the reason this item is important is because it heals you similar to an Estus would, only for slightly less HP. So if I use one here, you can see it replenishes some of my health. The next important item is the Divine Blessing, and this item will restore your HP back to full, no matter what health you're at, as long as you're not already dead. So for example, if I were to use it right now, it'll take me all the way back up to full HP. Then we have the Hidden Blessing, which is very similar to the Divine Blessing, only it will restore my FP bar to full. So if I use it now. Lastly, we have the Budding Green Blossom, and what this does is upon consumption, it will increase the speed at which your stamina recovers for 60 seconds. So if I roll and run around a little bit, use some stamina, maybe do an attack, the speed at which my stamina returns back to full is increased. Now, the last thing that I'd like to talk about before the actual PvP and invasions themselves is your Estus allotment. Now here you can see that I have 13 regular Estus and 2 Ashen Estus, and this is the Estus allotment combination that I would recommend. When you do an invasion or are summoned as a phantom, you get half of your Estus rounded down. So I have 13 regular Estus right now, so half of 13 would be 6.5, but rounded down since it can't be divided evenly, so I would get 6 regular Estus, and then half of 2 is 1. So in an invasion, or when I'm being summoned as a phantom, I will have 6 regular Estus and 1 Ashen Estus. This is generally a pretty good combination between regular Estus and Ashen Estus, and it is what I'd recommend for new players when they're starting out. When it comes to doing invasions, there are 2 main ways that you can invade. The first option is to use the Red Eye Orb, and this works by traveling to a location, then using the Red Eye Orb, and it will search for an embered host in the area, and then you will invade them. The second option is for anybody who's on PC. I would recommend using the mod Wex Dust. What this mod does is effectively queues the Red Eye Orb in all locations at once. So the benefit of this is that it dramatically decreases the amount of time needed in order to find an invasion. And so I would highly recommend this mod for anybody who's on PC. Alright, so now that you guys have a build all set up, you guys should be ready to start invading. And with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Peace.